Not fun. Well, and our convention center is unbelievable. How big of like gyms have you guys? Have you guys done any bigger tournaments where you go into the convention? Oh yeah, yeah, that's yep, yep. So like we'll do the one of the really big ones. Well, Chicago's McCormick Place is a huge convention center.
Yeah.
Convention
Should we get
center.
started?
Las Vegas Convention Center. We do that every year too. We're talking like 130 courts. I mean, you can't even you get yeah, you get like vertigo trying to figure out where you're going. It's crazy.
Okay. So we are gonna go ahead and begin our regularly scheduled city council meeting for this evening. Today is Tuesday, August 15th, and time is just after 6 p.m. I'd like to welcome you all here this evening. Glad that you're here with us, and we will begin this meeting with an invocation offered by Christian Liva. Is that correct? Are they here? They are not, and Mr. Porter is not here either, our backup. Councilor Williams, would you mind?
If you like, Mr. Mayor.
I would love that if you don't mind. So if you could lead us in the invocation, and then after that, we will, so please stand for that and then remain standing after for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Father in heaven, it's only because of you that any of us are here. As our Creator, our Ruler, our Redeemer. And I pray that as we meet tonight, it would be your pleasure that we seek first. Thank you for our great city, for the privilege of living in the great city of Caldwell. And I pray for wisdom and direction and grace as we administrate this great city that you've gifted us to live in. I ask your blessing upon this city and upon each one that serves in multiple capacities and lives within our city limits. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for that. Madam Clerk, if you'd please call the roll.
Scotty?
Here.
Register? Here. McGee? Albert? Here. Williams?
Here.
Good. Thank you so much. We do have 5 of our city council members here tonight, so we do have a quorum present. Are there any conflict of interest declarations for any council members regarding an item on the agenda this evening? Okay. That moves us into our special presentations. So we have a special presentation of an award from the Local Highway Technical Assistance Council, LTAC, for our street department. So if you would please come to the microphone, and if you don't mind introducing yourself, and then the time is yours.
I'm Lisa Popoff. I'm with LTAC. Thank you for having me here today to present awards to your staff for their outstanding achievements. So I was here a couple months ago to do a similar presentation, but I thought I'd do a brief overview of our training program. So our program is offered in the form of classes. They're held throughout the state, mainly in the spring and the fall. The classes cover a wide variety of topics, including safety, professional development, and the vast majority being construction maintenance techniques. Most of these courses have an exam of 80% to pass the class. There are 2 levels to our program right now, the Road Scholar and the Road Master. I'm here tonight to present awards to 2 Road Scholars and 1 Road Master. The 2 Road Scholars had to go through 80 hours of instruction, and they have 4 years to complete that level. Classes such as roadway materials, pavement maintenance and preservation, flagger certification, and then they get to choose 4 electives. They will be presented with certificate, hat, and engraved letterman tool. And the employees reaching Road Scholar tonight are Sean Torres and Stephen Tracy. I don't know if you're here or not, but you can come on up, and then we'll have the Road Master come up. The Road Master builds upon the Road Scholar. Again, 80 hours of instruction, 4 years to reach this level. And again, they take a variety of classes. And that level gets a Carhartt jacket and a certificate.
You know what? That jacket will come in handy today. Yes, please. And actually, do you mind taking a picture as well? Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Because you just opened it up right away.
Counselor. And Counselor Olga said he wants to see you wearing that jacket as you leave today, out in the 102-degree weather. Thank you. Very good. Thank you so much. We appreciate all the hard work and effort that you give and to go above and beyond. It means a lot. So I had the privilege to be out with these fine men this summer as we were doing chip sealing, and helping lead and guide me. And I tried not to get in the way too much, but it was phenomenal to see as we put an orchestra out there as they do that chip seal, and it really truly is. And they work tirelessly and give their all. So we appreciate that. And again, congratulations. Well done. Well deserved. Okay, we do not have anybody signed up for audience participation this evening, so that does move us to our consent calendar. And we do have an amendment to the consent calendar, and I'm going to go ahead and throw one more on. So it looks like the request is to remove consent calendar item number 7. And then also I'm going to ask whoever does make a move for this motion, if we could move new business action item number 1 to be before old business, so that we can go ahead and do our appointment for our Director of Aviation first thing, so we didn't have to sit through all that. So if you don't mind that in the motion.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I move that we approve the consent calendar with the amendment of removing item number 7. And I also move that we amend the agenda, moving item number 1 of new business to just before item number 1 of old business.
Okay, so we have a motion for amendment of the consent calendar and approval. Again, that amendment is to remove calendar item number 7, and then also moving new business item number 1 to be the next action of business. So motion from Councilor Williams and a second from Councilor McGee. Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Williams,
Yes.
Dottie,
Yes.
Register. Yes. McGee. Yes. Alden.
Yes. Very good. That motion passes unanimously. So that does move us then to that new business action item number 1, and this is for consideration of the mayor's recommendation for appointment of the Director of Aviation, Scott Swanson, for the Caldwell Executive Airport. And Scott is here this evening. So just a quick synopsis of that, and then maybe we'll allow Scott to come forward and say a few words. So we did have an interview panel, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Councilor Williams, but it was Councilor Williams, Councilor Doty were part of that, Brent Orton, and our HR director, if I remember correctly. And Scott was the unanimous selection by every committee member that interviewed all the candidates. That he did come out on top from every one of those committee members on that, and we appreciate the time and effort they took. And I had the opportunity to meet with Scott, and we sat down and had a discussion, and very impressed with him, his desire, his drive, his passion, and just excited to see, the great things that await for the Caldwell Executive Airport. And I'm excited for us to start living up to the name of Caldwell Executive Airport on that. So I wholeheartedly recommend and ask for the council's consideration and approval on that for Mr. Swanson to be our Director of Aviation. And Scott, do you mind coming forward and just maybe take a few minutes, kind of introduce yourself to the...
All right. Mr. Mayor, Council, I am Scott Swanson, the appointee representative for the Director of Aviation for Caldwell Executive Airport. And as Mr. Mayor had pointed out, I think the largest goal up front is to have Caldwell looking like Caldwell Executive and moving forward and seeing what progress we can get within the airport, and also community involvement going forward with the airport there. I just retired from the military, did 20 years, was a pilot for the last 11, and I've worked around multiple airports, all the way from general aviation up through Class A airports, the size of Las Vegas, Dallas, and Los Angeles. I'm very familiar with ins and outs of getting things done, and am excellent at being able to resource in areas where some may think it is not feasible to do. And I look forward to this challenge for Caldwell Executive and the city of Caldwell.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very excited for that. So this appointment would be through September 30th of 2024, next year, so through this next budget cycle on that. So if there's any discussion or questions or any motions from council?
And my dad, he was in the U.S. Army too, so that's great.
Very good. So, yes, Councilor Williams.
I move that we approve the appointment of Scott Swanson to the Director of Aviation for the Caldwell Executive Airport.
Good. And
Second.
we have a motion from Councilor Williams and a second from Councilor Stoddard, for approval of the appointment for Director of Aviation of Scott Swanson to the Caldwell Executive Airport. And with that, if there's not any discussion, the voting is open. And all votes are cast, so voting is closed. And that does pass unanimously, so congratulations, Scott, well done. We'll go ahead and do the swearing in this time, as we do with all our appointed positions, so if you want to come forward, and any family is more than welcome to come forward as well, if you'd like to have them up there with you, when we do this.
I, Scott Swanson, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Idaho, and the laws, ordinances of the City of Caldwell, and I will faithfully discharge the duties of Director of Aviation for the City of Caldwell, Canyon County, Idaho, to the best of my ability during my continuance therein. Oh, awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we are very excited that, as council is aware, but maybe some in the audience are not, this is the very first Director of Aviation that the city has ever had. And so that was just created a few months ago. And then as we did our nationwide search for that and found a great candidate. So we're excited for that and excited again for that new position and to see what the future will bring. So very excited. Thank you again. Appreciate it. Now he gets to go and get to work. So I know he's already got big plans for it. So that's fantastic. So. Okay, so now we'll return to old business. So old business action item number 1, a public hearing pursuant to Idaho State Code 50-1002 for consideration of the proposed budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2023 and ending September 30th, 2024. And as we prepare for this, Raylyn coming forward, just a reminder to anyone in the audience that if you do wish to speak on these items, if you would please sign up on the sign-in sheet, and you will be limited to 3 minutes on your testimony. So when you come forward, so you will have 3 minutes, and that's to allow for all that desire to speak in that regard. So just a reminder on that. So Raylyn, with that, the time is yours.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. So this budget proposed before you, there's a lot to it. So I just want to just kind of give you a brief overview. This budget will allow Caldwell Police Department to have up-to-date training and competitive with their pay wages. It will allow the Parks Department to replace equipment that's outdated and broken and has seen many miles of use. It will allow our Water Department to hire some essential staff that are necessary. It will allow our Electrical Division to get some necessary backup and crew that will streamline so many projects around the city. There's a need to every single dollar in this budget. And though every dollar might not get spent, there's a plan for it. So total proposed expenditures for this budget is $185,701,000 $703. Total proposed property tax revenues, $117,052,106. And then the total property tax revenue is $26,781,897. The total fund balance that we're proposing to use is $41,867,699. So today before you is a balanced budget. Though this seems like a significant increase, I will say that there's a few changes from previous years that I included in this budget. The first is going to be transfers. In previous budget years, we haven't included budget transfers in the expenditures of the original budget. They've always come in the budget amendments. And it seems kind of duplicative, but this is the best practice, and it's also recommended by our auditors. And so just from general fund, the total transfers is just over 14 million, so you can see why that would be increased. So, also would be urban renewal expenditures. These have also not been budgeted other than with budget amendments. And, so this year, obviously for 2024, we are budgeting for them, and that's just over $7 million increase. So just those two alone, $21 million that has not been included in previous budgets. So that's why this budget is so much higher. If I pulled out of those two things out of general fund, there would only actually be a $2.2 million increase in general fund, or 6%, so pretty minimal. But we want to see the transparency of the spending, and so that's what this gives you. I want to talk a minute about the cost allocation plan. It used to be called the admin allocation. I will say, when I first got here, this had not been looked at or even reviewed for over 10 years. This admin allocation really just got updated with the total costs and really didn't change the allocation. This year, we updated it to include facilities, which really, as you know, that's a new program that was created last year. I know that I received some, I want to talk about just golf with a cost allocation plan because there was some questions about why significantly that went up. And, you know, there are some funds like library and golf where those amounts were just fixed every year at $1,000 a piece. And so they really weren't being equitable. They weren't even included in a percentage. And I can see why that would be something that in previous years would just get missed. You know, it's something that would just get missed because it wasn't even getting updated. It wasn't allocated, it was just a flat amount. And so now it's part of this allocation that's reviewed annually. And with the facilities added in there, facilities goes to golf. They go and they clean a $10,000 or 10,000 square foot facility at Purple Sage. They repair that building. They spend hours out there. So it's something that we want to allocate that expense to. It's not just finance, HR, and the overhead of administrative. It's our facilities department and their expenses as well. So that cost has not been allocated previously, and so it's something that we included this year. And so, you know, I understand that those significant increases are something that are new and different, but that is why we're going to review it every year. That's something that, you know, this 10-year increase, if we had reviewed it every year in the past, this increase wouldn't have been this significant. It would have been a minimal of $1,000. It would have even been a decrease. But because this is 10 years worth of expenses coming at once, that's why it's so significant. With this budget, from when the budget workshops to now, some of the changes that I wanted to talk about that I did put in, that were included in the budget book, are the 13% increase for the sworn officers. The longevity formula is staying the same, as well as the timing of their bonuses. I did remove the K-9 and the fire public safety. I did remove the employee bonuses for every department and rolled it into the 6% set aside for the cost and comp study. A couple of things that were added were 2 vehicles for planning and zoning, as well as the mayor and the mayor admin. One is a leased vehicle and one is a new vehicle. In the capital fund, the ATS monitoring system was added. This was talked about in the budget workshop, but is not included in the amounts that were on the budget workshop worksheets. This is about $350,000. In the economic development fund, the furniture and moving expenses from to the Nancola Center that were originally included in general fund were moved to the economic development fund to use at the fund balance. I did add the one-time projects to use up general fund balance. The first one added was the city pool. The total added was $4.5 million. 3 of that is using fund balance, and then $1.5 million of that is a holdover from fiscal year 23. I have the downtown quiet zone of $4.4 million, the BMX park upgrades of $800,000, the lights at Gals Quad for $550,000, the O'Connor Field House improvements for $300,000, the Simplot Stadium insurance improvements for $800,000, the turf replacement for Simplot and Woodfield for $525,000, the lights at Levy Park for $125,000, and then police cars for $1 million. I did make a little bit of changes to the impact fee funds to add master plans for both fire and police, and then the bathhouse for the pool for parks. What this budget does have, just so that that I did not change, was the 5% COLA for all employees, the 6% set aside for the class and comp. It does have the health insurance cost increase. It does have the positions that are budgeted at mid. It does have the pay increase for the fire department determined by the CLA. It does have the city switching to Office 365, and it does have 50 new positions, 17 of them being public safety. It does have proposed fund balance use. I did mention that $41 million. Of that, $13,332,000 of that is general fund. So I can go through the entire list of all the other funds, but $13 million of that is general fund. Even though we're proposing use of this general fund, we are still leaving those reserves, so that $13 million that we spoke of general fund is still, the reserve is still being used, is still staying there as well. So we're using $13 million, but we are still reserving $13 million. And that is all I have for this budget.
Very good. Thank you so much. I know that it's been many months in the making and many meetings before this with the workshops that we've done, and you have done nothing short of a stellar job, and just so much gratefulness and gratitude for the long hours and days you've spent, and I appreciate the transparency. Like I said, it does look like it's gone up a lot, but there's a reason why, because maybe it wasn't as transparent in the past. So just appreciate the new look and a new set of eyes on it. So you've done an incredible job. So thank you so much. Council, questions from council?
Yeah, don't sit down yet, really.
Councilor Stanek.
And maybe Mr. Gee ought to lead this conversation. But anyway, so the $86,000 that we show for the golf, that cost is integrated into the cost of that building, or the refurbishing that building. Is that the way that works?
So I have the exact breakdown. So, because we're allocated, it's kind of an indirect. So $13,385
is the indirect cost for the council, mayor, and clerk portion. And then 28,456 is the finance IT portion. And then 44,952 is to pay for the facilities, and for facilities department to come out to Purple Sage and Fairview to help repair and maintain those buildings, yes.
Okay, so, do you know where that cost allocation went before? I mean, I don't think there was a cost allocation, but,
There was not, so that could mean that golf was paying for it directly. So, and it might be that I need to talk to Brett, and we might be a little bit of double budgeting.
okay.
That very well could be, that we could be double budgeting
Yeah,
for it a little bit.
that was my concern, that maybe that's the reason for that, so. But before that, as far as you know, it came from somewhere, but we don't know. Okay, thank you.
Councilor McGee, did you have?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Again, we appreciate the job on this. I know it's especially transitioning in administrations and you coming in, and it's a lot of work to do. A couple of quick questions. I know, and I've talked a lot about this, and it's important to me that we maintain the proper amount of reserve. I think there's some standards that are set by the Association of Idaho Cities, and we've talked about this before. So could you talk about, and I know it gets a little bit complicated because we have them in different funds, right? But I just want to make sure that we have the proper amount in reserve that's the recommended amount.
So we have a lot of funds, I will say that. So in general fund, the proposed amount that we're keeping is about 30% of our general fund expenditures for budget. So general fund, 30% of our budgeted expenditures is what we're proposing, which is about 13 million. And then for water and sewer, it's a flat amount, and so for sewer, it's about 10 million because of the replacement costs of some of those equipment. Water is about 5 million. And so I'm thinking off the top of my head, there are other funds that I do have smaller reserves amount, but some of that is going to be because we have the general fund reserve, and because of the cash flow and how it works, that it's not necessarily, like the capital fund does not necessarily need a reserve because of what the capital fund doesn't need a reserve amount, doesn't have ongoing expenses, it's just a one-time. So it's just the funds that have ongoing expenses, we're looking at having that reserve on, so.
That makes sense, and if memory serves correctly, that we're above what that recommendation is, especially in the general fund with that 30%, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then, Mayor, if I could ask just
Yeah.
one more. You mentioned the sworn officers, the 13% on the sworn officers. I was looking somewhere, and it could have been on a previous document too, where I thought it said 11, but I know that you said 13, and so help this history major out.
You were looking in the budget book, so it's a year-over-year comparison in the budget book from one fiscal year to the next fiscal year, and that is 11%. And there's a lot of changing factors in the budget book. And I will say not all the data within the budget book and how it turned out, but in the budget book, sworn officers before were at 2184 hours, and I have to get this right, 2283, I think is 20. There were, yes. It was like, and so we moved them we're proposing to move them to 2080, which then the salaries portion goes down and it moves into overtime. And so the overtime budget did increase and the salaries portion went down, but their wages, their actual salary, what they're getting paid goes up. So it's kind of a shell game a little bit of where that money goes, so.
Suffice to say, when we're asked that question, as I'm sure we will be, we can say that, yes, it was a 13% increase.
Yes,
Okay.
they are getting a 13% increase.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
I-
Yes, Councilor Register.
I also want to just thank you for everything that you've done. I know you've done a lot of changes, which actually I think is going to be really good for the city, because I think for a very long time it's been a weird budget. So the transparency and the changes, and I know it's kind of a shock to people right away to see some of these huge increases, but it's all gonna kind of make sense. With the police, with the 13%, you said that you were proposing the 2080. Is that going to be accepted so that we make sure they get their 13%? If it's not, will they still get their 13%?
Yes, they will still get their 13%, and from what I'm aware, like, I've talked to the chief and the deputy chief, and everybody is on board with that.
Okay.
So
And then as far as their longevity pay, they stayed on the quarterly payout?
that is correct.
Okay, perfect. Well, I appreciate you doing that, and I have heard from a lot of people that, putting it in their pay is actually better for them, but I just still feel like we should be giving them a voice, and so if they want to do it the wrong way, then it's not hurting anybody, it's not costing us any money, then we think that's okay. So I appreciate you, doing that, and again, I just think you've done a great job, and you've been here such a short time and managed to kind of correct a lot of problems that have been going on, so we appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Good, thank you so much. Any other questions? Yes, Counselor Elgin.
Not so much question, just a couple of statements for the public, but I want Ray Lynn to correct me in case I say something wrong. I don't want to mislead anyone. $41 million, $41.8 million is from fund balance. That is just one-time expenses where we're catching up on things that need to be caught up. We're not adding that to our budget for anything past this year.
That is correct.
Okay. And then the second thing, which I think is really important, is our complete budget is $185.7 million, but only $26.7 million of that is property tax. The rest is derived from other locations, enterprise funds, ARPA money, whatever it is, but that $185 million is not property tax. 26.7 is property tax. The rest is from other places. Just so everybody understands where that money comes from, and this property tax is a really bad word, and we just want to make sure everybody, all this big increase is not property taxes from other areas, is the point I'm trying to make.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. Counselor Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ray Lynn, could you clarify something for me? Caught me off guard just a little bit, so bear with me as I try to recall what you said. Things were added to the budget since our budget hearings. How does that happen? What is the process? If you added something, you had to take something else away, I'm assuming. And I guess it makes me wonder what can be added and what can't be in order for those budget hearings to have the integrity that they're intended to have.
So the things that were added were specifically one-time items. And so the request came directly either from the mayor or from the department head. And so those things that were added, if they were ongoing items, they were not added. And so that, because the ongoing money was already accounted for. And so one-time items are eligible to be added because we could use fund balance. And so it was ultimately my determination of whether or not we had enough fund balance and where I could find the money to balance. So.
Would it be hard for you to repeat those things that were added for me?
So 2 vehicles for P&Z, and then a new vehicle for the mayor admin and a lease vehicle, which even though the lease vehicle is an ongoing expense, the mayor did reduce something in his budget to add the ongoing expense.
Okay. Thank you.
And those were, and I think the P&Z also, so kind of to your question about the integrity of it, were things that were brought up during the budget discussions with the council to look at, think about adding this and that. So I believe all of those items were kind of the seed was from the discussion from the council to look into those. Is that correct?
Yes.
Raymond? So. Okay. Other questions for Raylyn at this time? Okay, thank you so much. Very much appreciate that. Okay, so we do have some people signed up to testify in this matter, and I said 3 minutes. We're going to allow 5 minutes for each of these individuals to come forward and testify. First on the list is Jean Creidenbring. So if you'd please come forward, And if you could state your name and address for the record, and then you will have 5 minutes for your testimony.
Okay, and before I begin, because I'm a teacher and people don't just do it orally, I have documentation and I have a PowerPoint too, so the audience can see. And I have documentation if any of the audience wants it. Okay, good evening. My name is Jean Craigbrink. I'm not pointing any fingers, simply sharing some information that the citizens of Caldwell need to be aware of at this time. All the facts and figures I will be sharing are taken directly from the City of Caldwell's budget book located on the city's website. The golf courses, the airport, and the city's financial stability are of utmost concern to me. According to Yale, a budget is a way to keep track of the money you are getting and the money you are spending. Not going.
There we go.
Okay. With that in mind, I have perused the budget book. As you can see in my documentation, if you add the pie chart expenses for all departments and funds, it totals $172,444,435.73. And the revenue to cover these expenses is estimated to be $135,822,137.72. If these budget numbers hold true, the city will have overspent to the whopping tune of $36,622,297.01. Over $36 million. Expenses should never exceed income. So this is my first concern. Now let's look at admin payroll services under operating costs for some departments. And Raylene explained some of this. That is the second section on my documentation. There are increased amounts of 233%, 445%, 464%, 507%, and, as she noted, the golf was 958%. There are some departments that have no operating or admin payroll services. Aren't these, or odd that the police, listed under general fund, which doesn't have admin or payroll services, had no admin or payroll services in 2023, but $113,169 for 2024. That's up 113,169%. Other items that are bothersome are the huge administration fees or raises. Can you do the next one? Okay, thanks. The tier payment for the rec department director and the golf budget. As you can see in the next section of the documentation is just a small sampling of administration raises. And this was after a 10% across the board raise last year. This is just a sampling, but I trust everyone gets the picture of the huge raises. How can this be justified when the peons that keep the city running in the lower end jobs barely make ends meet? The hourly wage positions, which are tough to fill, are the ones that need a raise. We need to raise these salaries to attract employees and keep them. A point of interest, according to livingcost.org, the average cost of living in Caldwell is $2,152, which is in the top 12% of the most expensive cities in the world and 6th out of 13 top cities in Idaho. Addressing the golf budget, when I watched the initial YouTube budget meetings and looked at the supporting documentation, it appears as though the supporting documents are slating the golf course to be majorly in the red in 2024. This makes no sense. If the budget passes with fees being raised over 5% again this year, and with the golf courses trending significantly in the positive for the last 4 years. Looking at my next issue, with the tier salary payment, the Parks and Recreation Director's salary appears in 4 different departments as noted in my spreadsheet. This makes no sense. I am a teacher by trade. When we got our budget for the school, the principal's salary wasn't taken from the individual school's budget. It was part of the administration budget for the entire district. That's how the administration positions should be set up as part of the city's administration budget. If you add the expenses, the total expenses equal $10,574,362. It is my understanding that each of these funds pay a nearly equal percent of the Parks and Recreation Director's salary. However, the Parks and Rec expenses are 62% of the total. Doing the math, I'm not understanding how this salary can be split equally across these entities. The Event Center nor the Gulf Fund receive any tax dollars, yet Cemetery receives $183,318 from property taxes, with Parks and Rec receiving $979,374. I raised this concern last year and was told it would be looked into, but it has gone nowhere. Why, if the golf course is self-sufficient with all the revenue being returned to actual maintenance and upkeep of the golf course, would they pay for a City of Caldwell administrator? So let's look at it concerning revenue. The total revenue for these four departments is slated to be $13,912,929. Looking at the total, recreation is 68%. Again, the percentages demonstrate that the director's salary should not be split evenly between these four departments, perhaps solely by the Parks and Recreation Department, but ultimately, city administration should be paid from a general administration fund for the entire city, in my humble opinion. Next. A couple of oddities for my final tidbits. The professional services for the Recreation Department is up a monstrous 4,142%. Concerning the street fund, the telephone operating costs are up 335%. That is not cell phones, as those remained consistent. Finally, another point of interest, water, sewer, and golf solely get money from user fees. Last one. Thanks for your time. I would implore the City Council to not pass the budget until some of the questions are answered and the massive raises lowered. In addition, I hope other citizens of Caldwell will take the time to ask questions and delve into the budget book. For each department in the budget book, it lets the citizens of Caldwell know the vision and mission of each department or entity. It is worth your time to peruse.
Good. Thank you very much. Questions from council on any of that?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have a question for Gene, but certainly some of these I'd like for our staff to address. I think there's some disagreement as to what the numbers presented are compared, and so at some point, perhaps after the public has had a chance to testify, we might ask staff to answer some of those questions, if that's okay with you, Mayor.
Yeah, definitely. Did Raylan get a copy of that, of your, if not, you
I
can
have more documentation.
so that she can look at that. Okay. And just real quick for you, I think it's actually divided between five, you said four departments, but I believe it's five departments. So
Well, because parks, but
recreation.
if you look at the way it's presented in the budget, they lump parks, recreation, and forestry together.
Mhm.
But it is parks and recreation to make it five, but you've lumped them on the city's website as one.
Yeah, so 40% for those two is allocated, and then 20% for golf, 20% CEC, and 20% for cemetery, if I'm not mistaken. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that it's divided between those five, even if it is lumped in. So you'd basically have 20% for parks and rec, and then forestry on it, so.
But still, I mean, I disagree with that because the event center and the cemetery are minimal and hardly have any money, and they're paying 20%, so it doesn't make sense.
Okay, thank
To
you so
me.
much.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate it. Okay, next on the list is Sue Cushlan. So if you'll come forward, and you will have 5 minutes for your testimony.
Won't take that long. Sue Cushlan, 121 South Louisiana, Caldwell. I totally agree with what Gene said. The information that we got was directly from the budget book online, and the pie charts don't reflect what Raylyn has said, I don't think. I think Councilman Static answered the question for the golf department as far as where those funds go from the 86,000. That has been a burning question for a lot of people at the golf course. And I am wondering why the director of those 5 departments is listed as an employee in each department. Why isn't she listed in the director's, administration? That's just a simple question. Because if she's an employee, maybe she needs to go out and mow grass. I mean, she can't be an employee of 5 departments. She can be a director of 5 departments, which to me, puts her in a different position, different category. Anyway, that's it. I was quick.
Very good. Any questions for Sue? Okay, thank you so much. Next is Stan Seward. So same deal on that, Stan, if you don't mind your name and address, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Stan Seward, 4003 Preston. Mayor and council, thanks for this time to ask a couple questions. First off, I think you addressed one question I had, and I saw it in the consent calendar, and that's it looks like the pool's going to get fixed. Fantastic. That's going to make a huge number of our kids happy, give them something to do in these upcoming summers, and it'll be a wonderful asset to the community to get that going again. So I do appreciate that. The other is kind of something that I used to beat Brent Horton up about at the airport when he'd do our budget there. And that's like, this budget for a department should be on 2 pages. You know, it's so complicated at that level, and then you have all these departments, and here as citizens, we have limited time, and we're looking at a giant city budget, and I don't envy any of you up there because it's an extremely complicated budget, and that's not, I'm not beating you up because it's a big operation. It's got to be complicated. So I guess the basic question that I have to come down to as a citizen is are we making headway? Is our, if you call it a owner's equity or however you want to look at it, but are we drawing that down a lot? Are we building equity in the city? So, and I don't know exactly how to best describe that, but I would be very welcome to hear you make a comment about the equity of the city, and if we're I mean, this is a fundamental question I think Gene was asking is, are we spending more than we're bringing in? So that's it. Thank you.
Yes, for sure. Any questions for Stan from any council members? Okay, very good. So that's all that is signed up on this matter. So those are all signed up in neutral. There's nobody signed up in support or against for that. So obviously some questions on that, and maybe one too. I'm trying to think of any other director that's not an appointed position that would be over multiple departments, and that question about how it's split up. And maybe you can, off the top of your head, maybe, I don't know what the city library director would be, or if it's different between an appointed and a non-appointed, because the Parks and Rec director is not an appointed position.
So we have a couple of positions like this where we do allocate among funds, and it's really about, it's not like, so there's a couple of ways to do this. We have employees that when they work on projects, they track it based off of a task code, and it's direct time when you're working on a grant, when you're working on that project, and so it's direct time. And just like I could do it, I could every single department that I talk with, I could track my time, and Julie could do that too, but that's time consuming. She spends all of her time tracking her time, and so it doesn't make sense. And so we look at what's cost effective, what makes more sense, where would she spend most of her time. So we look at what's the best way to do this. And so the best way is just to split her position up among the different funds and the departments that she oversees. That's the way that a lot of governments do this. We do it for other positions like our utility line locators. I'm trying to think of we've done it for, part-timers. We did it for people in the city clerk's office. So there's different departments that we do that. We split it up, not just because of budget, because of time. And so I know that we're looking at it because of numbers. We don't want to look at it, because this budget is smaller and this is smaller. But Julie might spend a lot of time driving out to Purple Sage. She might have to oversee because of employee issues. We don't know that. We don't know that. She might have to spend more of her time on golf because instead of parks. But it's not allocated that way. It's just allocated 40% or 20% parks, 20% rec, 20% cemetery, 20% CC, and 20% golf. It's about $25,000 each. It's pretty affordable for an appointed official. That's total with benefits. So.
Sorry, that's not for you. Good to keep going.
I know that doesn't always make everybody happy, but we can have her tracking her time and spending all of her time doing that, or we can have her doing her job. So, I wanted to bring up, they talked about the departments that were not charged on the admin allocation and which ones were. And why police was charged, that is the facilities. So it used to be that we had an employee that was in the facilities department that was charged specifically to police. I went ahead and took that person out of police's salaries, put them in the facilities department because, like I said, in putting department costs in departments and then allocating that cost back to police. Usually we don't do general fund to general fund. There's a resolution that we don't do those internal billings, but to show transparency, because our facilities department does clean the police department building, this huge building, that's the cost of that employee. So it's just that transparency. But that's why you don't see the admin allocation in any of the other general fund departments. So.
Okay. And I may just kind of touch on the raises were brought up, just kind of clarifying that, and then we'll jump into some questions on that. So, last year there was because it was talked about, getting the lowest paid, the highest raises, and we did do that last year. So there was a 10 to 15% pay raise for all employees across all city boundaries last year. Those lowest wage earners at the city received a 15% raise. Those at the higher end received a 10%. So it was staggered so that we did get more money to those that weren't making as much. So they did receive a 15% increase. And that was for city employees. That does not include elected officials. It did not include the mayor, the city council did not get any raises on that regards. And then this year with this proposal is that additional 5%. Again, that's across the board. And then the wage study, which is nearing its completion, I think the next month or two. And then that will really help to differentiate. We're showing perhaps those lowest wage earners may get 15, 20, 25% increases, depending on how that comes back compared to other positions. So the 5% is just that level mark for everybody. And we foresee some to be good at the 5%. And it's going to be more probably your supervisors and up. And a lot of those lower wage earners, I think we'll see some dramatic from 10, 20, 30% even just to get them to where they need to be. So that's what that money is set aside for. So on that. Councilor Stott, I think you had
Mr.
a comment.
And this is for the audience too, I think. And Ray Lynn, maybe you can address Stan's question first about building equity in the city.
Yes, for sure. So part of government is that we do not want to make money. That's a big part. So like if we have too big of a fund balance, we are either poor budgeting or we're overtaxing. Like we don't want to have so much of a fund balance that we're not providing the services that we do. And so it's a fine balance, right? So I understand your term of equity, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're providing that service, that we are getting the projects that we want, that you guys want done, like the pool, that we're getting those projects done and completed, and that we have a balance enough to get the city services, but not too much that we're overtaxing. So it's that balance. And right now, our budget's bigger because we're using that fund balance to get some of these projects done, like the pool, like some of the repair and maintenance that's needed. So, while still maintaining a reserve balance that is fiscally responsible. So.
So, yeah, hold on a second there. So, other questions, Councilor Spada?
Yeah, just probably for the audience and our taxpayers, is that I'm used to a cost allocation, type of accounting too, from where I came from, and I was, my budget was $300 million a year, and I had, field departments, United States, US, and overseas. And there were times if we had personnel changes, or if we didn't contract as many potatoes in a certain area, I might have been allocated still 25%, but in all reality, it was probably 40% because I had to spend a lot more time doing that. But Ray Lynn is right. If I had to keep track in my previous life of all that, it would be a nightmare. So, you know, sometimes it's our best guess, but if it's wrong, we'll definitely correct it the next year then. That's just the way the system works. But I just have to say, this type of accounting system that Ray Lynn introduced to us is 100% better than what I was used to when I was first elected to the council, where many times we didn't know where the hell the money was coming from, didn't know where it was, and this is a lot better. Talk about transparency, it's 100% improvement.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Councilor McGee, do you have a question?
Mayor, and Raylan, I just want you to quickly address Gene's comment about the unbalanced budget. I mean, I've been through this budget now with you for several hours, and I don't see that at all. I mean, one of the first statements out of your mouth tonight when you presented the budget was that it was a balanced budget. I don't think anybody on this council would vote for a budget if it wasn't balanced. Plus, I think you were required by state law for it to be balanced. So can you kind of explain, I don't know if you saw her handout, but kind of explain why this is indeed a balanced budget?
So I think a lot of the misunderstanding is the use of fund balance doesn't always seem like it's a balanced budget because we're using cash on hand instead of bringing in those revenues. So sometimes a balanced budget means revenues in, expenditures out. And that's what a lot of times a balanced budget means. But we're using $41 million in cash to balance our budget. So we are not bringing in those revenues. That's already cash we have on hand to balance our budget. And so that's what is creating our balanced budget. So we're not expecting those revenues. We already have that cash on hand. We're not borrowing it from anywhere. We already have it. So.
Yes, Councilor Albiel.
Ray Lynn, when Gene presented this, it caused me I'm wondering if we're interchanging words or I'm reading it wrong. The term raises was used, 62%, 464%. This is increases in cost. It's not raises in somebody's paycheck, am I right?
If you're looking online in the budget book compared like from year to year, then that would be increase in cost, not necessarily raises. That is correct.
I don't remember anybody getting a 464% raise.
No. It would just be increase in cost. Yes.
That's because the word raises was used, and I would want to make sure that we were clear on that. That's cost for a department or whatever, but it's not a raise in somebody's check, correct?
That is correct.
And then, so correct me if I'm wrong here. We talked a lot about the Parks and Recreation Director and that it was broke up into 5. But that person's salary is whatever his salary is, whether you break it up between 5 departments or you call the director and pay it as director, still costs the taxpayer whatever that salary is. You're just allocating it over different departments. The dollar amount to the taxpayer comes to the same dollar amount, am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay, very good. Other questions from any council members? Okay, very good. Thank you so much. And I'll just echo Councilor Stoddick's comments too. That it was just refreshing the way that it was presented. The online, I don't know if any of the council had the chance to get online and see the budget book, but the presentation was it really was a night to day difference. So appreciate that and all of the work and effort, and again the transparency. And I would just echo those sentiments too. That's why you see a lot of these what appears to be these huge changes or additions is just because, and in my humble opinion, it's being done correctly. And so that's why you see these big changes. You won't see that next year because now we're on that right path, and it was a big jump to get to it, but it was worth it, in my opinion, on that. So appreciate that. Okay, thank you so much. So that concludes that portion. So with that, I would stand for a motion to close the public testimony portion of this hearing. And a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor Williams, second from Councilor Register to close the public testimony portion of this hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. So with that would move us into deliberation. And again, questions for staff are always appropriate, and I will go ahead and read this bill and ordinance by title into the record. So this is for ordinance number 3525, bill number 31, an ordinance entitled Appropriation Ordinance for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2023, appropriating the sum of $185,701,703 to defray the expense and liabilities of the city of Caldwell, Idaho for said fiscal year, authorizing a levy of sufficient tax upon the taxable property and specifying the objects and purposes for which said appropriation is made. So any discussion or any sponsors of that bill and ordinance?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Allgood.
I would sponsor bill, ordinance number 3525, bill number 31, and move for its approval.
Very good. Do we have a second? Motion from Councilor Allgood and a second from Councilor McGee for adoption of bill number 31, ordinance number 3525, and move for its passage by title on first reading. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, with that, the voting is open. And all votes are cast. The voting is closed, and that motion does pass unanimously. All council members present voting in favor. Stand for a motion to close that public hearing.
So moved.
And a second? So a motion from Councilor Stoddick and a second from Councilor McGee to close this public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. So that moves us into, I think, number 3, is that right? Because that was 1 and 2. So action item number 3, pursuant to Idaho State Code, to consider acceptance of the fees over 5% of that previously charged from the Caldwell Event Center, Fire Department, Golf Department, Police Department, Planning and Zoning Department, and Recreation Department. Ray Lynn.
This one's much quicker. So I worked with the departments on these increases or new fees during the budget process. These fees are included in the budget, in the revenue projections. And when we set the fees or when we looked at the increases, we set them as the intent was never to make a profit, but just to cover the city's costs for running the program or department. And most of the time, it's not always the case of covering the costs, as most of these funds are supplemented with sales tax or property tax. And that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you so much. Any questions for Raylan regarding the proposed fee schedule? Okay, excellent. We do not have anybody signed up and to testify on this item. And again, this is any fees that are over 5% are required to come for a hearing in that regards. And kind of like what Raylan echoed, that not in the business to make money, but want to make sure that they're fair and equitable. So there are some significant increases on some of those fees in which it was found that they were being basically funded by the taxpayers when really they should be funding by the people that are asking for those, whether it's a application, right-of-way permit, whatever that may be. So is there any, so with that, like I said, there is nobody signed up to testify, so I'd stand for a motion to close the public testimony portion of this hearing. And a second? So a motion from Councilor McGee and a second from Councilor Williams to close the public testimony portion of this hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. So with that, is there any questions for Raylan or any other staff before I read this resolution? Okay, so this is resolution number 205-23, a resolution of the City of Caldwell, Idaho, a municipal corporation of Idaho, adopting a schedule of fees for services provided and regulatory charges as specified by City Code for Caldwell Event Center, Canyon Hill Cemetery, Caldwell City Clerk, Caldwell Fire Department, Caldwell Golf Courses, Caldwell Library, Caldwell Planning and Zoning, Caldwell Police Department, and Caldwell Parks and Recreation.
Mr. Mayor,
Counselor Williams.
I move for the approval of resolution number 205-23.
Okay, do we have a second? So a motion from Counselor Williams and a second from Counselor McGee for approval of this resolution. Is there any, discussion on that motion? Okay, with that, the voting is open. And all votes are cast. The voting is closed, and that passes unanimously as well. And that moves us into number 4. Actually, that was number 4. Never mind. Okay, so that will move us into new business. And real quick, again, just want to comment on with that budget. Obviously, culminates this evening, but we have had hours and hours of discussion with workshops and many more than hours and hours of work behind the scenes with Ray Lynn, pulling multiple all-nighters. And this is all done with the input of, the appointed officials, the directors, the managers in regards to their budget. And as you know, it is the council that approves that. And kind of reviewing that. And so again, just feel it was a very transparent process this year. Really appreciate all the work and effort, and a big sigh of relief. And I feel like Raylene should take the next 2 months off. So, but if she did that, then she would be working overtime again after that. But just again, a huge thank you, Raylene, for all the work and effort. I know there's many others too behind the scenes. But yeah, it's kudos to you and your staff and everybody that did that. So well done. Okay, so we've already got new business item number 1 out of the way. So that moves us to new business action item number 2. This is consider acceptance of the budget amendment for FY 2022-2023. Raylene.
Me again. This is for the fiscal year 23 budget amendment, as we talked about in the budget presentation. This includes a lot of the transfers that were not budgeted, as well as our renewal funds. So Rochelle will be presenting this to you on the public hearing.
Which will be September 5th.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Any questions for Raylene? So this is just really just setting that public hearing for September 5th.
That is correct.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Okay, so I would stand for a motion. Again, this would be for accept the budget amendments to set the public hearing date for Tuesday, September 5th, 2023 at 6 p.m. A second?
Second.
So a motion from Councilor McGee and a second from Councilor Stoddard to set that public hearing date as noted. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. And that'll move us into action item number 3. This is a request by Zach Turner on behalf of Renison Companies to vacate a portion of right-of-way at the subject site known as 2605 Franklin Road. Mr. Mack, is this you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This is a brief item. There's a development called Prospector Point, which is at the intersection of 21st Avenue and Franklin. And it sits right behind where that big electronic billboard is on that corner there. When ITD came and built that road through, they left kind of an awkward parcel there, which is that parcel that has the billboard, and then they had to provide an access road behind it. So there's a road that actually runs behind that hill that some people have used as a bypass, which has been blocked off, but people manage to get through it. And so, as part of this development and as part of the funding that they have received for this development, the city had agreed and sent a letter that we would support a possible vacation of this little section of road. And this section of road, of course, is not being used for traffic, and so it really eliminating it doesn't impact the transportation system at all. And this developer has offered to run through the vacation process and then instead place an easement back over the utilities over that area, basically, that's being vacated. By putting an easement there, it enables them to be able to landscape and use that frontage to beautify it and work it into their site, as opposed to continuing to have a road or an access driveway there that's not usable. There still is, access still has to be provided to that corner lot that has the sign, and they have worked that into their design. And so staff supports this vacation and the easement to be established in its place, and I stand for any questions.
Good. Thank you so much. Any questions from council? Okay, thank you. And Mr. Turner, looks like you are here, so if you'll please come forward. If you could state your name and address for the record, and then if you need it, you'll have up to 10 minutes. But hopefully you don't need that much
I
time.
don't think so, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, would it be possible, Emmanuel, could you pull up the, like the Caldwell web map on it? Do we have that? Can you help Rob maybe to, so we can kind of see? Go ahead while we do that.
Sure,
So.
yes. My name is Zachary Turner, and my address is 2025 East Riverside Drive in Eagle. Thank you all for listening to Director McDonald's presentation. I'm here in support of the vacation of the right-of-way. We really want the entrance to our project to be beautified, as Rob mentioned, and yeah, have any questions for me? That's all I have.
Very good. So I think and even a Google map maybe even could work. I don't know if that could pull up. Yes, please go right ahead. We're working on any questions from council. So Councilor Allgood.
So when you talk about you want to beautify the area to your project, you're talking about the development that's going between the freeway and this location, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And you just want to clean that corner up there?
Right now, it's a road that has a barrier in front of it. No one uses it. And then there's the area around the triangle, which is our southern neighbor for the sign. We've spoken with that neighbor, and they've agreed that we can also do some beautification around their parcel as well. Basically, that is one of the main entrances to Caldwell. That whole area is, for us is the gateway to our community and one of the gateways to Caldwell, and we would like to beautify it for the benefit of both. So
it's this right here.
it is.
So that stretch right there. So that's right away right now. Yep.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Any other questions? Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, and I was the only person signed up for this public hearing, so I stand for a motion to close the public testimony portion of this hearing.
So moved.
And so a motion from Councilor Stoddard and second from Councilor McGee to close the public testimony portion of this hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. So with that, this bill and ordinance is Bill number 30, ordinance number 3524. It's an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Caldwell, Idaho, reciting petition for vacation of Remnant Road public right-of-way at 2605 Franklin Road, reciting that appropriate notice was given a public hearing, determining that vacation of said public right-of-way be in the best interest of the City of Caldwell, and that said public right-of-way shall be vacated, providing an effective date. Do we have a sponsor of this bill and ordinance?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Allgood.
I'll sponsor Bill number 30, ordinance number 3524, and move for its passage by title only.
Very good. Do we have a second? We have a motion from Councilor Allgood and second from Councilor Williams for sponsorship of Bill number 30, ordinance number 3524. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, with that, then the voting is open. All votes are cast, the voting is closed, and that passes unanimously. And that moves us into action item number 5. This is a public hearing for comprehensive plan map amendment, rezone, zone 23-6. The City of Caldwell is requesting this. And again, as I mentioned, was from open space to high-density residential, and a rezone from C2 commercial to R3 high-density residential for approximately 0.82 acres. The property is located on the south side of Thomas Jefferson Street, approximately 824 feet east of the intersection of Smead and Thomas Jefferson. With that, staff, I'll turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Is that working? Okay. Morgan Besaw, Deputy Director for Planning and Zoning. As was mentioned, this is a city-initiated application for a comprehensive plan amendment as well as a rezone. city parcel is 0.82 acres. It is located, as was mentioned, on East Jefferson Street near Sneed Parkway. On the map in front of you, it is the parcel located or highlighted in red. The comprehensive plan land use map amendment proposes a change from open space to high-density residential and the rezone from commercial, C2, to R3, high-density residential. The map on the right is the comprehensive plan map. So everything in green would be designated open space. Red is commercial. Yellow is industrial, and blue is industrial, and yellow is medium density residential. On the left is the zoning map designation. So while the comprehensive plan map has an option for open space, there's no corresponding zoning designation. So even though the comp plan says open space, the zoning designation for the parcel is currently commercial. North of the site is also commercial. The purple section, the darker purple to the east, is R3. And yellow is medium density residential. So you can see that the subject site is actually only 330 feet away from another parcel that is zoned, or several parcels that are zoned high density residential. And while it would appear from
Morgan, sorry, do you mind speaking up? I think some people are having difficulty hearing you on that microphone.
Sure.
I know it's pretty soft.
Not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
So while this parcel is zoned commercially, and the land around it is zoned commercial both to the south and north, east, and west, if you look if you look at the individual parcels, they've actually developed differently. So the parcel directly to the east is a charter school. Directly to the south is a city park. Directly to the north, although it is zoned commercially, it is a multifamily residential development that was approved previously when multifamily residential developments were allowed in commercially zoned areas. And then to the west is an undeveloped parcel. And then further west, there would be an Idaho Department of Labor building, as well as some light industrial parcels. These are the photos of the subject site. The first photo is looking directly south onto the site from the multifamily development. You can see an image of the multifamily development directly below when you look north. The top right picture is looking at the site from the charter school, and then the bottom picture would be an image of the charter school to the east of the site. So this parcel is designated open space within the comprehensive plan, like I mentioned. This is likely due to it being owned by the city and adjacent to the existing city park. There is no zoning designation, which is why this is as open space, which is why it's zoned commercially. However, the surrounding uses are geared more residentially, with a school, a park, high-density residential in the immediate vicinity. And an R3 zone, high-density residential, would provide a buffer to transition between the industrial and commercial uses to the west and the single-family residential development to the east. This aligns with several of the policies within the comprehensive plan, such as allowing for higher density development in areas where there is the infrastructure to support it. Also, I'd like to point out that if given a medium density residential designation in the comp plan, it caps the density at 40 units per acre, which is actually rather low for medium density residential. And there's quite a large gap. When you go up to high density residential, it goes up to 25. So even if someone were to want to develop in a true medium density fashion in the future, 8, 10 units per acre, they would have to designate it as high density residential to get that density, the way our code and comp plan are currently written. So there is no development proposed at this time. The city has auctioned off this parcel to utilize the proceeds for other city projects. It is currently under contract and will be developed by the future buyer. All utilities, landscaping, parking, access, et cetera, will be evaluated at the time that a development proposal is brought forward to the city. No agency notifications were received. We received one public comment following P&Z, but before City Council, from the charter school, and they mentioned that they would prefer if the parcel remained as open space. However, as I mentioned, there is no open space zoning designation, so it is currently commercial. P&Z heard this application on July 26th, and they recommended the council deny the application on 2 grounds. They did not want to look at individual comprehensive plan amendments, since the city is about to embark on a more comprehensive revision of the comprehensive plan. and they did not necessarily feel that high-density residential was a better fit than the existing commercial designation. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Very good. Thank you so much. Questions? Councilor Williams.
Mr. Mayor, thank
Ready.
you.
Yep.
Yes, I'm especially interested in what the planning and zoning recommended on this. And to be fair, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking if this were a developer here, presenting something in this fashion, two words that are always triggers for me are amendments and rezones. And especially given the fact that we are in the middle of our P and Z people working so hard to get us a new master plan update. And my fear is that we take a Winchester Mystery House approach to our planning, and the spirit moves me, and so I build a staircase, but I really would like to wait until we get our master plan finished, rather than, as P and Z committee stated, doing this as kind of a piecemeal approach. And so I'm very concerned about this.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Allgood?
This is kind of a new one for me. I don't think I've seen one like this before, where the city is choosing to change the designation. Is there I don't have any idea who we're contracted with to buy it. The open space next to it, is it privately owned by some other individual? Is there plans for that, the rest of this site somewhere?
So there's open space directly to the south. It's a city-owned park. If you're speaking of the undeveloped parcel to the west, it is just an undeveloped parcel that could be developed tomorrow, provided they came in with something that's permitted in the use chart for commercial. So
It's not owned by the city. It's private property.
private property to the west, I believe. The one comment that I would make regarding the comprehensive plan, because I believe there was a question about it a moment ago, while we are looking at redoing or revising the comprehensive plan, there's a potential that would take up to 2 years. I believe some of the contracts that we were looking at were 20 months. So it's quite an extensive period when we know that there are a few issues with the comprehensive plan. The main one being, as I mentioned, that the medium, so low density, I don't think I mentioned this part, low density residential has densities of 3 units per acre. Medium density residential goes up to 4 units per acre, and then high density goes up to 25. So there really is a gap in the comprehensive plan of that sort of 6, 8, 10, 12 units per acre. And so if we don't allow individual comp plan amendments in that time, we would just be acknowledging that we might not have any of those sort of medium density 6, 8, 10 unit per acre developments coming through.
I wasn't finished. So what is the impetus for your department to come forward with this request? Why not the person that is purchasing the property?
So the mayor may have more details than I, but I believe it was in the contract. So when when we auctioned off this parcel and someone put an offer on it and we wrote up a contract, part of the contract was that the city would take care of the rezone and comprehensive plan amendment ahead of time.
No, that is correct. So.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just curious, how much did we get for the property?
I have no idea.
$199,000, if I remember correct. Is that right, Rob? Does that sound? Do you remember? Mm-hmm.
Question. So we've already sold the property?
So we have not. So it went to auction, and the winning bidder, because any city property that is owned, we can't just sell it. It has to go to auction. So it went to auction. Winning bidder was the 199. Like I said, I think it was 199. I think it was just, or it may have been right at 200,000. Whatever the minimum bid was, is what the bid came in at. And then, so it's not closed yet. So before they closed, they said, okay, we're the winning bidder, but before we finalize, we want this to be what we hoped it. So their plan, by understanding, is to do similar to what's across the street. I believe it's the same owner of the apartments across the street. So they're wanting to do the same thing, is my understanding, on this property. But before they closed on it, they wanted to make sure that they could do that. So that's why the request on that.
Okay, so if it's denied, then what's their plan?
So if denied, I imagine that they would cancel back out, of that, and then we would need to re-auction the property.
Okay, but right now, the idea is that for them to buy the property, they want it rezoned. One of the conditions of buying it was to have it rezoned, and because they own the apartments across the street, it's likely they would be putting apartments there.
Yeah, one of their conditions was that it be rezoned before they close it, so we still own it, but, yeah. And then like I said, if it is denied, then we would go back to, we'd re-auction the property.
And then, I guess my other question is, once it's rezoned and it closes, then they can just build apartments on it without coming back to council. It's an automatic approval.
Actually, no, so with the R3 zone, it is still a special use permit. So to do those, they would need to come, well, and that would go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They would review it, look at it, and make sure that it meets, aesthetics, whatever they wanted to look at for that. And then that would have to be approved through a special use permit.
Are they getting anything in the contract that says it will be approved later down the line?
Oh, yeah, no, we could not do that, so that's gotta be a separate hearing on that.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned. This seems like a conflict of interest, controlling the zoning on the property we're selling. Something feels, I don't know, is there a legal opinion on this? Because it seems like we're in a conflict here.
So, yeah, as they're going through the terrain, I know property actually just south of this, very similar. So what property you see there is M1 on the bottom, actually, where's my? So this piece here, and then if you went further down, maybe actually, sorry, I'll do it up here so the people that I can. So this piece here, and then if you went further to the south, it's almost identical. It was owned by the city. I was the planner on it, that's how I remember it. And so city rezoned it so they could sell it for M1. So it has, and I'll let Taylor weigh in, but in that immediate vicinity, very similar stuff has happened, or items in the past for that.
Mayor and council, thank you. Councilman Allgood, I would tend to agree with the mayor. That has been done in the past, and it is kind of typical for other cities to do that as well. So I can get you a more extensive sort of analysis on that if you'd be interested, but for the short answer, yes, it is. This is a typical kind of practice that has been done in the past.
But it's a great question because it is.
Well, and something, because, I mean, I was here for that, and I don't remember the city coming forward with that zoning prior to sale. After the sale, yes, but for prior to the sale, I don't remember that occurring.
My understanding that it was chronologically similar. That's what I understand from conversations. Mr. Mayor, do you remember kind of how
That's my recollection as well on that. So I actually remember having the neighborhood meeting at that site when I was the planner for that rezone. And when that house used to be there before it was torn down, so. Other questions? Okay, so that is the only, there is no, that is the only person signed up to testify. So motion to close public testimony portion of this hearing. In a second.
Second. So
that's a motion from Councilor McGee and a second from Councilor Stoddick to close the public testimony portion of this hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion passes unanimously. Okay, so now it's time for, if you have any other questions for any staff, for Morgan or for Taylor, and any deliberation, discussion among council members, and it is your decision on how we proceed on this, so.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm stuck on it. I really am. Councilor Allgood kind of feeds into what I'm already thinking here. And I would hate to get into a situation where I'm concerned and qualifying so many of my decisions because of the amendment and the rezoning, and yet for ourselves, I'm quick to say, sure, let's build more apartments and rezone it so that we can there. And I just am, I'm really not thrilled about this idea at all.
Councilor Register?
I don't like it, for all the reasons that we've already talked about, but the other thing that kind of bothers me about it is that if we rezone it and they buy it and then we deny later the apartments, if that's gonna open us up to some kind of problem with them thinking that by rezoning it before they buy it, they kind of have the approval to build later. Does that make sense? Like we're sort of leading them down that path of, here, we'll rezone it, you guys buy it, and then they come forward and say, well, we want to put up however many apartments, and say the council at that time says no, does it open us up to any problems that way for giving the impression that we're for anything?
Councilor McGee?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I was looking over at council, based on what Councilman Register just said. I understand what her thinking is there. In your opinion, is there a potential for some sort of legal issue if under that scenario, if we were to approve this and then we were to deny the actual project, do you have any legal concerns with that?
So I would keep, Mayor and Council, I would keep those issues a bit more separate, right? They're gonna still kind of come through a regular process as any other sort of developer would or any other sort of project. So I think that that's kind of that insulation that you're looking for, what you're asking about more. It would, if it's something like a special use permit and needs to go in front of planning and zoning, whatever it is, it would be analyzed separately, not with the understanding of, well, this was rezoned for this sort of project, right? It's none of that. The contract, in the language in the contract doesn't delineate any sort of future expectations. They would go through the process just like any other sort of applicant would. Does that answer your question sufficiently?
No, I think it does. It's kind of, I think, and if they know what they're getting, they know that they have to jump over these two hurdles in order to get this done. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and maybe too, just kind of a little bit of the chronology of this timeline. So the city was not aware of their desire to have it rezoned before they closed on it. So obviously went to the auction, was bid on. We were working on getting it closed. We thought we were going to have it closed within 30 days. And then these concerns and issues came up from the winning bidder. And so I just want to make sure the council knows that staff was not aware that if they won the auction, now they're going to ask for a rezone. This came up well after the fact of the auction closing, and then they brought up those concerns and stated that they did not want to proceed unless the property was zoned how they wished it to be. So it was an after the fact issue. So just want to make sure council doesn't think that staff was working this behind the scenes before the auction closes. It was something that came up after the fact. Does that make sense on that? Is it possible to pull Caldwell, the web map on there? Do we know?
Mayor,
I was
we're
hoping to
working
use
on
that later tonight.
I think he may need a separate login, so we're kind of trying to figure out what that would look like. I can see.
It's not that necessary. I'll pull it up on my computer.
Yeah.
Jefferson.
Like when you log in.
Mr. Mayor, if
Yes,
I may
Councilor Stoddard.
comment, just to dovetail off what Councilor Allgood said too, sometimes, and it's not to say that legal is wrong, their counsel is wrong, but sometimes when you have a project that's already been completed and you buy another piece of ground just across the street from it, sometimes the assumption is made you can do the same thing with it. And I'm just wondering from a legal aspect that this wouldn't back us into a corner because, and I'm not saying he'd win in the court of law, but sometimes those assumptions are made, and that's not good either because it costs us money to fight the legal part of it then too. So, just a comment.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Any other comments, questions on that? I think they're close to pulling up if they can. I think you have it on your monitor though. Is that right, Councilor Register? So yeah, it's tough. Like I said, if you look at it from Google Earth, it looks the same, that property. So it's basically that eastern third-ish quarter of that parcel that you see at the top would be that piece of property. So it's just under 1 acre. Here we go, right here. So where'd my thing go? So it'd be, so let's see, this portion of the property right here. So, and if you remember, that was originally part of this piece, and we looked at trying, because obviously it wasn't being used. We'll actually talk about a little bit some other property in the city later tonight, stuff like this. We thought of trying to sell it to use that money to provide some improvements here at the Gals complex.
So I have a question for staff. Well, why was it that planning and zoning suggested a denial?
The two comments that they had were, one, that they knew that we were embarking on a comprehensive plan amendment that would be more holistic, and so they were concerned about doing one-off comp plan amendments. And then the second one was that they just weren't sure, since the majority of the area was zoned commercially, that having this parcel as residential, if that would be, congruous with the rest of the surrounding area.
Any other questions? Okay, very good.
Mayor, I'm
yeah.
prepared to make a motion.
Yeah.
I move that we deny CPM 23-6, Zone 23-6.
Very good. So we do have a motion for denial of the request. Do we have a second?
Second.
So that motion was from Councilor Williams with a second from Councilor Stoddard for denial of the request. Discussion on the motion from any council members?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Alden.
I would just make the discussion, I'm a no vote, but, and I just want to make it clear, if this was a private person coming here asking for this, it would also be a no vote. It would be, whether it's the city or whether it's a private company coming, putting apartments, it would be a no vote for me either way. And, so taking the city ownership out of it, that's my perspective. So yes to my, yes to your motion, yes. I know.
It's like a yes, no, a double no, double negative is a positive. Okay, any other discussion or comments? Okay, with that, and then voting is open. And again, so this motion is for denial, so a yes vote is supporting the denial. And voting is closed, and that does pass unanimously. So that, again, does deny the request. And with any denial, even if it is the city, obviously state code does state what can the applicant do to gain favor. And summarizing, please correct me if I'm wrong in this and jump in at any time, felt that it's isn't the right fit for the area, concerns of misleading the potential buyer of approval down the road of apartments. I'd rather see a holistic approach of that development at that site. Does that sound more or less?
Well said, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, so motion to close that public hearing item.
So moved.
And a second? Second. So motion from Councilor Register, second from Councilor Stoddard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes. So that moves us to number 6, action item number 6. So this is a zoning ordinance amendment request. Another one from the Planning and Zoning Department. We'll see if hopefully you pat better than 5, or hopefully you can get 500. We'll see. But this is a request from Planning and Zoning Department for amendment of Chapter 10, Article 3 of Caldwell City Code, and this pertains to neighborhood meetings on that. So rather than read the rest of that, I'm just going to turn it over to you, Morgan, and for your presentation.
Yes, once again, Morgan Besaw, Deputy Director of Planning and Zoning. This is a zoning code amendment that is focused primarily on public hearing notification. This proposed amendment is due to response from and feedback from citizens about the ambiguity of the code. It has new text addressing full public hearing processes for all land use applications. It also provides a central location within the zoning ordinance for all applicable land use public hearings instead of multiple locations. It also clarifies and addresses language conflicts within the existing code. This application was also heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission on July 26th, and they made a motion to recommend approval of the zoning code amendment with these 3 modifications. So, based on the text that the staff brought forward, they required 3 additional changes. That the notice of the neighborhood meeting be placed in the mail at least 15 days prior to the date of the neighborhood meeting rather than 10. That they increase the radius notification sent to property owners adjacent to land use items from 300 feet to 500 feet. And that they reword the language for proof of posting subsection to address public hearing delays based on an applicant's failure to prove posting on more than one occasion. So if an applicant fails to prove that they posted notice on their site, then their application would be delayed. So those are the 3 changes they recommended in addition to the modifications that staff brought forward. So once again, this is a staff or city-initiated application. So So the first change, and probably the most noticeable, is that the heading changed from neighborhood meetings to public hearing process to be more inclusive. Previously, all the public hearing information was underneath neighborhood meetings, which was not exactly accurate. So public hearing process is more accurate. Next, it clarifies the purpose of a neighborhood meeting, and it extends the time frame for neighborhood meetings from 2 months to 4 months. Previously, an applicant would hold a neighborhood meeting with the residents, and then they'd have 2 months to submit their application to the city, which sounds like enough time, but it's not necessarily enough time if they really want to relook at their application and take the feedback that they heard at that neighborhood meeting and integrate it into the application and then bring it forward. So if any changes need to be made after that neighborhood meeting, they needed a little bit more time to submit their application to the city. So that is where that change came from. Next, to amend A6 to, this is to adjust based on the P&Z recommendation to change the 10 days to 15 days for neighborhood meetings, just so that people receiving their mail have a little bit more time to be aware of when this meeting's happening. The next is a new subsection titled Mailing and Publishing of Hearing Notices. And as I mentioned, this is just explicitly providing all the details for how this will be in compliance with state statute for land use applications. This is the other P&Z recommended modification, is changing our current radius notice from 300 feet to 500 feet for all applications. 300 feet, I believe, is based on state statute, so the 500 would be an increase above and beyond that. This is another one of the more significant changes in this code amendment. It is requiring that applicants post notice on their own property instead of staff, and it gives specifics for what that posting should look like. So it's bringing it more into compliance with what other jurisdictions have. It tells you what size of sign to have based on the type of application, and how to do that as the applicant, because staff has taken on that responsibility for many years. And with the number of land use applications we're seeing, we just don't have time to post notice on all of these properties, and so we're asking the applicant to do it, which is very in line with what other jurisdictions are doing. It has a new subsection addressing types of public hearing. It talks about there being legislative hearings, but also quasi-judicial. It talks about decisions and the decision guidance the deciding body should be using when making their decision. Addresses requirements for imposing conditions on an application, maintaining records of hearings, findings, as well as statutory requirements for notifying the applicant on approval or denial of the application. It also talks about appeals, so it talks about requests for reconsideration by an affected person, who can bring forward an appeal. And then also, based on the most recent appeal that the council heard, it clarifies that Category A annexations do not qualify for reconsideration. It has text addressing criteria for considering reconsiderations and what happens if the council chooses to reconsider an application. So just sort of clarifying some of these processes where we've noticed that was needed. And lastly, there's a subsection addressing the process for appeals generally. So any applicant or party aggrieved by a decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission, hearing examiner, or other body can bring forward an appeal. What that appeal has to have in it, setting, burden of proof. Oh, did I skip it? So these text amendments are consistent with the adopted goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, so there's no change needed to the comprehensive plan. We did send this out to all the agencies for comment. We received no comments from any public agencies, internal or external. And as mentioned, the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval with those 3 modifications. Staff has reviewed this, and the text amendment is necessary for public convenience. It meets code, and it's consistent with the goals of the comprehensive plan. That's it.
Very good. Thank you so much. Questions from council? Yes, Councilor Ogden.
Morgan, since we're moving from posting the signs ourselves to having the applicant post them, was there a fee for that? Will any fee be changing because they're posting their own signs. I don't know whether we charge them for that posting or, no?
We did not charge them separately, it was built in, and I know that, some of our application fees have changed as recently as this evening. But I don't quite remember how much was for staff posting it, and if that was reflected in the change. I would have to ask, the director.
If there is a fee included for that, would you make sure that would change with this, please?
Yeah, and I don't believe there was, and if so, I mean, probably pretty minimal. I don't know if you've seen how it's been posted in the past, is usually it's like an orange piece of cardboard, and then you would staple the paper onto that, and then you pound that into the property.
Yeah.
And those obviously blew down a lot if it rained. I mean, it was a pretty terrible way to post, to be honest. So this is more of a really heavy duty sign, large lettering. So I think there was some staff time considered, but it was pretty minimal, just because, like I said, it was done pretty quickly just to get it done and out of the way. So, but I'm pretty sure there wasn't a separate, it was just
No, it wasn't
incorporated fully.
separate. If
Yeah.
anything, it was baked into the application. And like I mentioned, we had just gone through and re-looked at our application fees to make sure that they were, going to be accurate. But I can verify again with the director to
Yeah,
make sure
as long as they're accurate, you know, we charge based on work, you know, as long as they're accurate, I'm good.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Okay, very good. And there's no one signed up, on this matter. So with that, I stand for motion to close the public testimony portion of this hearing. In a second.
Second.
Motion for Counselor Sadek and second for Counselor Williams to close public testimony portion of this hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Okay, so that then moves us into deliberation discussion. Staff is available for any questions. Again, this is for the request for a legislative matter for zoning ordinance amendment 23-1 to move forward with the amendments as was presented this evening by staff. Any discussions or any motions?
Mayor, I move that they be approved, go forward for finalization.
Perfect. Okay. Do we have a second? So a motion from Counselor Allgood and a second from Counselor McGee.
Can I interject briefly?
Yes, please.
So there was two versions of the ordinance in the packet, and one was as staff recommended and one as P and Z recommended. And I would just want to make clear for the record if it was the staff recommended version or the P and Z recommended version with those three changes or without.
Okay, very good. So, and maybe just highlight real quick what those three changes were.
They were changing the notice for neighborhood meetings from being sent out 10 days before to 15 days before, changing the noticing radius on projects from 300 feet to 500 feet, and then working on the language just a teeny bit regarding what happens if an applicant does not provide proof of posting in a timely manner.
Okay, so I guess just a clarification on that motion, if it's the staff recommendation or from what P and Z put forward with those, basically taking it from a 300-foot radius to a 500-foot radius, and from a 10-day notice for your public hearing or for your neighborhood meeting to requiring a 15-day notice when that's sent out.
That confuses me, I'm not sure which is.
What was the difference between the staff and the P and Z recommendations?
So staff went with, so previously we had 10-day notice for neighborhood meetings. We just left that. We didn't change the date. P and Z recommended increasing that time frame so neighbors have more notice. Staff went with the 300 feet notice radius based on state statute. P and Z wanted to increase that radius notice to 500 feet so more neighbors are noticed. And then the third was, like I said, just tweaking a little bit of language about if an applicant doesn't provide proof that they posted properly, that it's okay that we delay their project.
So the planning and zoning version is the one with the changes?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one I would be
Yeah.
motioning for.
Okay. Okay, so I'll agree with that. Okay, so it would be for those increases as was commented, or was noted from the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Okay, any discussion on that motion? Okay, with that, then voting is open. All votes are cast, so voting is closed, and that does pass unanimously. Okay, that moves us into action item number 7. Consider resolution authorizing reallocation of ARPA funds to the Caldwell Fire Department for the purchase of radios in the amount of $461,000. So it's got to be some nice radios.
That's
or a
Mr.
lot of
Mayor.
them.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, city staff, members of the community. Rick Frawley, Fire Chief here in Caldwell. Appreciate your time and consideration with this request in front of you tonight. Special thanks to our partners in finance that have helped us identify our needs and funding options for our journey here as we enhance our systems. In front of you, we're requesting funds from ARPA to help purchase new both portable radios and mobile radios that will allow our resources to have the same level and standard of capacity across the board. We currently have a mixture of different capabilities with our portable radios. To give you an example, our company officers, the supervisor that's on each fire engine has a multi-band radio that allows him or her to communicate with different resources throughout the valley, but the other firefighters and engineers that are on those resources don't have that same capability. So this request in front of you will allow us to replace and enhance those portable and mobile radios for all of our staff across the board, so everyone will have the same radio. Additionally, what we've done in order to reduce the long-term impact within the organization for cost and replacement down the road is instead of assigning a radio to an individual firefighter, we now have radios assigned to what are called seat positions. So to give you an example, on a fire engine, you have 3 to 4 positions on that fire engine. And up until now, what we had done historically is we would assign a radio to an individual firefighter, and that was their radio, and they would take it around. So that is really not sustainable. It's not scalable as we grow our firefighters. So now those radios are going to be assigned to the seat positions. So one for the captain, one for the engineer driver, and one for each firefighter. And that way it gives us scalability as we grow as an organization. And I stand for you to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief. Appreciate that. Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Williams.
Does this, will county charge us anything to program these, or can we program them ourselves? And if so, is the cost included in here? Because sometimes that gets a little sticky.
It has been challenging in terms of like a scalability issue, but the county has been actually very good to work with recently as we've built these relationships and as we've kind of built our team vision as we work with the county communications team, and they've been very crucial in helping us to bridge the growth gaps we're seeing. So shorter answer is yes, they'll program the radios, and we're always looking to ways that we can be scalable across the board throughout Canyon County.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilor Scott.
Chief, so council assume that that'll be in your budget for the future to replace those because of the ARPA funds. They're going to disappear on us.
Part
Right.
of our plan, working with finance, is we're developing long-term plans across the board, and that would be one of those items that we place, in a long-term vision to replace, just like fire engines and, any of those long-term capital assets.
Okay, good. Thank you.
What's a typical lifespan on one of those radios?
Usually 5 to 10 years, but one of the challenges that you face is the durability. These are ruggedized radios, but we, radios go into the same environment that we go into in terms of burning buildings. So that can wear and tear can be a tough issue when it comes to the lifespan of these radios.
Yeah, I can imagine. Very good. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much, Chief.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here, sticking with us to the very end. Okay, so with that, do we have any motions for approval of this resolution?
Mayor, go ahead.
Very good. And second? So a motion from Councilor McGee and a second from Councilor Williams for approval of the resolution authorizing the purchase of the radios in the amount of $461,247.09. Any discussion? Okay, with that, the voting is then open. All votes are cast, so voting is closed, and that motion passes unanimously. That moves us into action item number 8, bill number 32, ordinance 3526, to annex Cumberland subdivision phase 6 into the Caldwell Municipal Irrigation District. The request to pass on first reading by title only. Do you need to say anything, Mr. McDonald? I really like you, but I don't want you to speak. So, very good. So, yeah, I think this is pretty standard, as we're aware of that. So, again, this is just bringing it into the municipal irrigation district. So, do we have any motions, or I guess sponsors of bill number 32, ordinance number 3526?
Mr. Mayor,
Counselor Alden.
I'll sponsor bill number 32, ordinance number 3526, and move for its approval by title only.
Very good. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Counselor Allgood and a second from Counselor Stodic for passage of bill number 32, ordinance number 3526. Any discussion on that motion? With that, then the voting is open. And all votes are cast, so voting is closed. And that motion passes unanimously. That moves us into action item number 9, consider acceptance of the finance report.
Mayor,
Counselor Williams.
I move that accounts payable in the amount of $2,986,237.63, represented by check numbers 171522 through 171812, and payroll for the amount of $603,077.10, represented by check numbers 38872 through 38897, and direct deposits be accepted, payments approved, and vouchers filed in the office of the city clerk.
Very good. Do we have a second? Second. Motion from Counselor Williams and second from Counselor Allgood for acceptance of the finance report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. I think that was everybody, right? So the train was going by, so it's hard to hear, but I think we got that approved tonight, so that maybe that won't happen in the future, so.
And maybe we should mention that staff spent a lot less money this time than they normally do. Did you notice that was a lower amount?
Good job, staff. Okay, that moves us into council reports. Council register.
We went to the Virginia Park, community event, which was fun. No, there were a lot of people there. It's pretty impressive at how many people are showing up to these events. And then I think the only other thing I just kind of wanted to put out there was, I know at the last meeting, that Counselor Allgood had brought up the idea of, maybe a formation of a committee to look at some of these city codes to make sure that we're on track and that we're not having some of the problems that we've been having, and haven't had any feedback on that, so just wanted to kind of put it out there again, about creating some kind of committee similar to what we did with the impact fees to make sure their codes are correct, that we're not wasting people's time by coming here and having public hearings. If there's stuff that's automatic approval, what the council or the council can or cannot do, all of those kinds of things. So just putting it out there again.
Very good. Actually, yes, I'll touch on that too.
Okay.
Comments at the end. Counselor Stodic?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. Counselor Williams?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just a note for the council to be aware of, the Caldwell Executive Airport will be closed for seal coating from September 6th through 18th. And the 6th to the 10th is a complete closure of the runway. But that might come up, or you might have a question about that, but it's a continuation of our improvements out there, and that was probably one of the big things we discussed at our last Airport Commission meeting. And an important note for you, that those are continuing to be improved, and things are going to be looking good out there, but it's a big deal when we shut our airport down.
Yeah, especially when it's such a busy airport. So, very good. Counselor Allgood?
Nothing.
Okay. Counselor McGee? Okay, very good. Okay, so I do have a few, so I'll just touch on these real brief. So, swimming pool, the bid was accepted tonight, and the money was approved for that, so we're excited for that. So we will move rapidly on that. So we'll reach out to that winning contractor tomorrow and let them know on that. You had a question on that? That is the goal, is by July 1st. So, obviously there's some things out of our hands on that, but I haven't seen the contract to see I believe that date was in there of what. Yeah, which is a very reputable company here in town. So yeah, but that is the date. So that's the goal. There you go, ready, set. So, because yeah, that'd be great to have it for the 4th of July. So that is the plan. So like I said, we will move on that. We'll get those papers signed. I'll sign those in the morning and make sure they're aware of that and get them going. So I just want to touch on, again, try to be brief on this, the urban renewal area. So there is discussion looking at, obviously, final decision is with the city council. This was discussed last night, I believe, at the urban renewal meeting.
I wasn't here last night.
Okay. So looking at a potential new urban renewal area specific to the downtown. So very different than past urban renewal areas that took up hundreds, if not thousands of acres. This would encompass around 80 acres within just the downtown core to allow for some of the development of the undeveloped parcels. This also would provide options for parking garages. I know that we've looked at that P3 option with the economy kind of changing. Some companies aren't as interested in that, especially for a parking garage. But with an urban renewal area created in that downtown would create some options, again, for the parking garages. We continue to look into that and the potential for that, because obviously that's needed. We're excited for that. Parking obviously always comes up, so we've gotten, I know at least one and maybe multiple responses on their RFP for the parking for downtown for metering, and we're excited to bring that to council in the near future so we can start moving in that direction on that. And then just touching on council register. So I did speak with Robin Collins, our planning and zoning director, in regards to kind of those questions that the council had and her desire at this time, and we can have her touch on this more at the next meeting if we wish, was with the comprehensive plan update that is coming with the hiring of that firm. They'll be doing a lot of outreach. They'll be doing community meetings, things of that nature that would bring that forward. So she felt that would kind of cover that. It is a lengthy process, but it does, open up for, different types of workshops, things like that, community outreach to bring them community members in here. And that she felt that was the best way to kind of go forward with that. So I can follow up with her on that. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to her as well. But that was the stance was, is kind of moving in that direction, allow that company to kind of move forward with those reviews on it. And then that really is it for this. We do have an executive session, so I'll end my comments there and stand. Oh, sorry, Mr. McDonald, that's right. Yes, thank you so much for reminding me. Right now, be perfect.
I move that we delay this to the next meeting.
Yeah, do you have a second? He's even got a presentation. Look at this.
The city applied for 2 grants through LTAC for bridge funding.
Debbie wants you on the microphone.
Sorry. So the city applied for 2 grants from LTAC to be able to replace 2 bridges in Caldwell that are old and of poor rating. One of them was the Kimball Bridge over Indian Creek, and then the second one was the Rose Garden Bridge, which is right here coming down the hill. The Rose Garden Hill Bridge is the one that won the award. And then a little bit later, when LTAC went out to look at it, they decided they didn't want to touch it because of the nature of the bridge and the issues with the Notice Canal that cross underneath it. And so they came back to us and said, even though we awarded you this bridge, we would rather do the Kimball Bridge. And in my opinion, the Kimball Bridge was a higher priority because it receives a lot more traffic, and it's right where the gazebo is. They'd be rebuilding that entire structure, which I feel like is a much better deal for the city. The only caveat to that is because they opted to do that bridge with the city's consent, we have to close this bridge to traffic because they don't want to be liable for it anymore if the city wanted to keep it open. And so what this means is that the city will propose to close basically this section of road from the top of the hill down to the bottom and leave it only as a pathway that can be used for pedestrians to go up and down the hill. And then the vehicle traffic will just come down Indiana and go this way on Marble Front. So at some point in the near future, we will bring an item to council that just initiate the closure of that section of roadway. This is at the request of LTAC, and then in exchange, we would be getting a new Kimball Street bridge. And I believe that was 100% covered. There's no city cost share at all, which is unusual. And that's why we immediately threw in these 2 bridges into the application process. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions or stand for any questions.
I remember running up that road many times in cross-country practice, so good riddance. But I guess it's still available for.
Mayor, my comment was also a personal comment. We used to live on Canyon Hill, when I was a kid, and we used to ask my dad to drive down that section because it was more exciting, and it was going fast downhill than the Indiana section. So this will be a big disappointment to the McGee family, Rob, just to let you know.
To find a new road to get your trails on going down. So any other questions at all for Rob?
Just a quick question, it's somewhat related. For years, there's been discussion of reducing the grade on North Indiana going up the hill towards Water Tower. Is that anywhere in the works anymore, or is that still a pipe dream?
So reducing the grade would be very difficult at that location because you'd be cutting into the hill. We did talk about several years ago about widening that section, right where you're coming down the hill and you're making that right-hand turn onto Marble Front. It narrows down there, and it's difficult because of you're basically in a canyon. And so to widen that out requires a lot of earthwork and cutting into the property, and it's impacting the property that's way up on the hill. And so we have talked about that, and at some point, the intersection of Marble Front and Indiana will need some sort of improvement there to help traffic flow. That's probably going to have to happen something within the next 5 years, I would guess. The one other thing that I will note is before this is closed down, we would certainly put out public releases. We'll make sure the public knows what's going on and the reasons why before we actually go and close anything, so that the public knows what's going on.
And I imagine there will be some public that's not happy with this, but again, it boils down to safety. You know, that bridge is very deteriorated. Obviously, if something happens and we know about it, then we're on the hook. A lot of liability there. So that's kind of what it ultimately boils down to.
Yeah, and it already has a weight limit, a 3-ton weight limit, if I remember correctly, which is less than most full-size pickup trucks. So.
And it's good that everybody obeys that, because I see all of them driving around so they don't go over the bridge with that weight limit. So, okay, very good. And actually, real quick before we go to executive session, these two probably are more appropriate outside of executive session. So these are properties that the city owns. We're going to talk about a property for potential purchase, but these are ones that the city owns, and just want to kind of get the vibe of the city council. I know that Councilor Stoddard had mentioned about properties that the city owns, that are they properly being used. So two of them real quick to look at. Can you pull up the web map again, Emmanuel? And they're both in the downtown core. I don't have the one address is 0 Main Street, which isn't going to help. You can type in 621 Main Street, and that should get you close. Okay, maybe, actually, you know what, hold it right there. This actually shows, well, so, get on the microphone here, apologies. So one of the properties, is here at I did, guess we gotta go home. So one of the properties is here at Kimball and Albany. So this vacant lot here is owned by the city. Was purchased, I think it was a joint deal when we purchased the property on the boulevard. It was the same owner, so he wanted to try to sell both of them. So he said, you got to buy both if you're going to buy one. And that's the one at Kimball. Actually, I think it's on Kimball as well. So Kimball and Blaine right there, that empty lot that's next to the event center. So the deal was you buy either both or none of them. And so the city bought both. So this is one property that is not being used by the city. Destination Caldwell wanted to use it to store those storage containers, the big huge metal ones from boats, And we said, no, that's not an allowed or appropriate use for it. But I drove by it and it's a mess. It really is. And so that's one that we could look at. Now, again, it's city owned, so it would have to be auctioned off for that, but that's one that obviously could be utilized a lot better fashion on that. So that's one of the properties. And then the other, and I may have you zoom in on this one, Emmanuel, is going to be this property like right here. Can you zoom in on this lot right here a little bit so we can see it a little better? So it's this, a little bit more. Very good. So it's this piece right here. You can maybe take off that layer. Is that like this? So it's a little clearer. There we go. It's picked there. Someday we will have good technology. So scroll down, and it should be the base layer down below. Yeah, take off the base right there, and that should clear it up. It is not as easy as it looks, just so everybody knows. It's like, why can't he just do that? It's kind of a pain. And maybe drag this way a little bit so we can see that parcel better. Or even zoom out, yeah. So this piece right here, this is owned by the city. There was a building there once upon a time that burned down, and I believe the city purchased it at that time. So it is currently being leased to Indian Creek Steakhouse for a whopping $36 a month. And so the thought is, would it be best for the city to sell that property? With the way that things are going in the downtown, property is of a high premium these days. Would get well over $100,000, I imagine, for that piece of property on that. So that's another one. And obviously Dillon would have the opportunity, it'd be auctioned. So Indian Creek Steakhouse, if they wish to purchase that, they more than could come in and make an offer on that if they wish to do so. What's that? So I'm not sure, to be honest. I know there are benches and things out there, outside dining, I think some storage as well. But anyway, just, again, looking at these properties, are these really being utilized the best for city to taxpayers' dollars? And so those are two properties that we've looked at potentially maybe bringing for a city auction on that. Just kind of want to get, I don't know if there's any interest in that or not. So that would be like right in here. Let's see. Where's the road? Yep. Okay. So it'd be this piece right here, that first one. So that parking lot is right there, the new one that was built a year or two ago. So it's this property here. Right there, 204. So that's zoned traditional neighborhood. So whatever, again, the allowed uses were within that. If somebody purchased it, they could build a home on it. There are some commercial uses allowed at that corner. Wouldn't be a bad location, but anyway, so that, again, just a property not really being utilized, needed, that we can see could possibly be used for, again, for whatever the sell that would be, then use that for city purposes. Yeah. Yes, it is. So we probably need to send ourselves a letter to get code enforcement out there. We'll get right on that, the city attorney said. So, okay, so obviously no decisions right now, but would that be amenable to perhaps bring those for discussion to council to see about auctioning those properties off? Okay, very good. Okay, then that concludes that. So now I stand for a motion for a very quick executive session. And if you're in a motion, please do read, you will need to read what's written on the thing. It's the reason why the executive session.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Allgood.
Pursuant to Idaho Code Section 74-206, subsection 1C, for the purpose of discussing the acquisition or interest in real property not owned by a public agency.
Okay. Do we have a second? So a motion from Councilor Allgood and a second from Councilor Stoddard to go into executive session as listed. And we do need a roll call on that. Madam Clerk, please.
Allgood?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Stoddard?
Yes.
Register? McGee?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Then we are in executive session, so we do need to stop the recording.
Yeah, that,